Welcome to Mach 10 Sports. This November 30th, 2023 episode. It's championship week, guys. But we hadn't done a live show here in about a week. I had a little baby boy, Rhett Shoemate. That's his name. So that's why we've been away. Just want to start off and say, if you missed, I have it pinned on top of my Twitter page. If you missed Monday's episode, it was an interview with Chris Lowe, ESPN's college football senior writer. Talks about the future of the SEC, this week's upcoming SEC championship game between Alabama and Georgia. We also discussed the 2024 scheduling. Some of the dates that were released was brought by Chris himself. Just some surprises in the SEC. It's a good 25, 26-minute interview. I highly encourage you to go watch. That's why we've been away for the last week. I just want to let you know. But again, if you like what we're doing, go like, subscribe. It's free. You can do it on all your podcast avenues. If you listen to us live here on Twitter, Facebook, if you're listening on YouTube, go like, subscribe, comment. Tell me how bad I suck. Tell me how good I am. Just let me know how I'm doing overall. I'd love to hear. And just before we get started, I just want to tell you, appreciate you joining us again. Dave Shoemate here from Mach 10 Sports. Used to work in college football for 10 years, 4 different SEC schools, went to the University of Alabama. I feel like I have a good feel for the SEC. That's why we started Mach 10 Sports, doing football, basketball, and baseball. But again, we're a ton of episodes in. Just wanted to recap. I thought no better time than now. But again, like I said, it is championship week. We will crown multiple champions this week across college football, Group of 5, Power 5, as you know. In my opinion, though, this could be the year. This could be the toughest decision the college football committee has ever had to make on Saturday night, Sunday morning. True nightmare scenario it could happen. We'll discuss all those potential opportunities or potential scenarios through the playoff, besides probably Michigan losing. I mean, I don't have Michigan losing to Iowa unless you do, but I broke down 5 different scenarios. I didn't think that was likely, so we kept that one out, but we will break down all the college football playoff scenarios. We'll obviously preview the big one in Atlanta at the Benz this weekend, Georgia, Alabama, the SEC championship game. In fact, we've kind of been eyeing this one really since middle of October. I think we've kind of started settling. It kind of feels like after LSU lost to Ole Miss, it's like Alabama keeps improving. They may be in Atlanta. And for Georgia, we never really thought they wouldn't get there, did we? At least I did. Never really thought they'd get there. Your boys' playoff predictions going into the season looking pretty good right now. Looking pretty good. I had Georgia, Michigan, Texas, and Florida State. With Oregon being an outside in, almost nailed it. Not bragging. Not giving me the old shoulder pat, but got to be honest, a little proud of that. We've already had a few transfer portal entries. Doesn't technically open until December 4th, which is this upcoming Sunday. So that'll be big, or upcoming Monday, sorry. So that'll be big around college football. A lot of guys have already announced they're going into the portal. A lot of names around the SEC, a lot of names that could be coming into the SEC, especially the quarterback. Should be a big-time wide receiver market. Be a lot of wide receivers there, a lot of playmakers. So we'll discuss those portal entries. The SEC ACC basketball challenges this week. 2 leagues split their 14 matchups, going 7-7 across a 2-day challenge. We'll break down all 7 of those matchups, all 14 of those matchups just from Tuesday, Wednesday. Not in depth, but we'll go enough for you to understand. I'm not going to go break down just shooting percentages and stuff like that. We're going to talk about the meat and potatoes of this. But before we get into the college football playoff scenarios, just a little around the SEC. How about Bobby Petrino heading back to Arkansas? Back as the head hog play caller. Used to be the head hog there before obviously the motorcycle accident, Jessica Durrell stuff. We're not going to get into that. But Bobby Petrino talked to some people at A&M. Even some of his analysts, his right-hand guys just came into work the next day. Bobby Petrino's office was cleared either Monday or Tuesday. Didn't even meet with the AD, Ross Bjork, at Texas A&M to even get fired, so it really didn't matter. But in an interview, he kind of came on and kind of hinted at one of us discussed about what a lot of us probably already thought maybe. Quote, Jimbo wanted to keep his terminology, and I didn't sleep for months trying to learn it. That is a quote from Bobby Petrino. I forget what show. But Jimbo wanted to keep his terminology, and I didn't sleep for months trying to learn that terminology. Now, that's not crazy. Alabama does that. Alabama keeps all the same terminology for all their new coordinators, especially on defense. But even on offense, too, they keep it to what Nick Saban's used to. That's not unheard of. So I don't really think why he's complaining there. But essentially, you can read between the lines that he didn't have full autonomy, and that bothered him. But if you watch the games, if you have 2 eyes, you saw that yourself too. So I'm not telling you something you don't already know, but Bobby Traynor back to Arkansas in in a make-or-break year for Sam Pittman, I don't hate it. I mean, some people are calling rumors saying, hey, if he's successful and they're not very good and they still get rid of Sam Pittman, maybe bump him up again. I mean, are we out of the statute of limitations of the Jessica Durrell stuff? I don't know. We're not going to get into rumors, but in a big year for Sam Pittman next year, he brings back the old sheriff, Bobby P., to go along with an improved defense. The new coordinator, Travis Williams, they played hard. They were improved. They weren't great. They were definitely improved from 2 years ago. But Bobby Petrino back in the SEC. Back in the SEC. I mean, I don't really think he left. He just came over from another school. But he's back in Fayetteville. That'll be interesting. I actually kind of like the hire, to be honest with you. Bobby Petrino, though, that's funny. But we're talking A&M, he just disappeared in the middle of the night, literally. Similar to kind of how he did with the Falcons or Louisville to the Falcons or the Falcons to Louisville. Yeah, I mean, Bobby Petrino, excellent play caller, though. Excellent play caller. But let's get to it now. The college football playoff scenario. I stayed up late last night along with dealing with a newborn last night for all you people who've never dealt with one before, breaking down all the potential realistic college football playoff scenarios. We got 8 teams competing for 4 spots. The 8 teams: Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Florida State, Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Alabama. Those are the 8 teams that we have in this. Let me repeat it again. 8 teams competing for 4 spots: Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Florida State, Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Alabama. Those are the 8 teams that have a real legitimate shot. I guess Louisville maybe a 9th if crazy stuff happens, but them losing to Kentucky, Ohio State would get in way before a ACC champ 2 loss Louisville. So I didn't include them in here, but let's go through the first scenario. All the favorites this weekend win. When I say favorites, I'm talking about the Vegas line gambling favorites. Georgia, Michigan, Texas, Oregon, and Florida State all win. In that scenario, me, Dave Shoemate, I would go Georgia gets in, Michigan gets in, Texas gets in, and Oregon gets in. I just want to first talk about, I incorporate body of work, eye test, and you got to combine it to bake that perfect cake. That's what you have to do. If you're just going on just eye test, I don't think that you can't do that either. It's a little bit too subjective. If you're just going straight resume, I think that's just too white and black. It's very surface level. You got to dig deeper. That's where I think the eye test comes and helps with that body of work analysis when you're analyzing the body of work. But again, I think in this scenario where all the favorites win, when Georgia, Michigan, Texas, Oregon, and Florida State win, I'd go Georgia, Michigan, Texas, and Oregon. And you could change the seeding a little bit around if you wanted. I mean, if you wanted to put Oregon at 3, Texas at 4, that's fine as well. I just think those are the 4 best teams at that point. And Florida State fans, as you can see on my Twitter, 350,000 interactions on my tweet the other day talking about if Alabama beats Georgia, the 2 of the top 4 teams, you can't tell me if we're trying to get the best teams in. 2 of the top 4 teams are not Alabama and Georgia if Alabama wins this weekend. You can't tell me if we're trying to get the 4 best teams. I know some people are like, it's the most deserving. That's fine. That's your thoughts. You can have the 4 most deserving teams. I always thought we were trying to just get the best teams. And people are like, well, they hadn't done that in the last 10 years. Then we're doing it wrong. Let me repeat myself. If we're not getting the 4 best teams in and we're just going with the 4 most deserving, we're doing it wrong. Simply that. I'll just leave it at that. We're doing it wrong if that's what we're doing. Again, Florida State fans are going to be upset. They would be undefeated, not getting, but again, the starting quarterback being out, you have to account injuries. Jordan Travis, that has to be taken into consideration. Him being out, throw in Tate Rodemaker. He's now playing, and he won in a solid environment last week against Florida, and maybe some things change if they go look and dominate a Louisville team that just lost to a 7-win Kentucky team. I mean, think about it from this standpoint. What would the opening line be if it's Georgia is the number 1 seed, Florida State gets in the Sugar Bowl? That semifinal game, what's that line? 16-17? I would still load up with Georgia. I know some people are like, well, we don't play the games on paper and teams, underdogs win all the time and Vegas doesn't know everything. Well, they don't make those big, nice, shiny buildings with those water fountains and all those expensive drinks and the clubs you can go hang out with in Vegas because they're losing bets and not getting right and not being right more times than not. So, I mean, in this imperfect world, let's pull it up. Sorry. In this imperfect world, that's all we really have to go off of. That's kind of an unbiased, objective, data-driven point is a college football spread made in Vegas, the professional odds makers. I know they're wrong at times, just like nothing's perfect. Then there's exceptions to every rule. Oh, well, Cardale Jones at Ohio State, third-string quarterback, he won it all in 2014. Okay, I get that. But I think that's an exception to the rule, too. I mean, the committee, I could see putting Florida State in over Texas. I could see that. Or Oregon. I personally, though, in that situation, all the favorites win. Georgia, Michigan, Texas, Oregon, and Florida State win this week. I'm going Georgia's 1 seed, Michigan 2 seed, Texas 3 seed, and Oregon 4 seed. And again, you could flip-flop Texas and Oregon from the 3-4 seed. But if all the favorites win, that would be my scenario. The second scenario here, the favorites win and Alabama pulls the upset in the SEC championship. So again, the favorites win. So in that case, you have Michigan, Texas, Oregon, Florida State, and Alabama all win. In that case, I think Michigan is for sure in. Big Ten champ, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now you have, you math wizards out there, 3 spots with 5 teams fighting for that. 3 spots, because remember, Michigan's already in. We got 3 spots with 5 teams battling it out. Those 5 teams, in my opinion, at that point, this scenario happens where the favorites win, except Alabama pulls the SEC championship or wins the SEC championship. I'd go the 5 teams that are fighting for those last 3 spots are Oregon, who would be a Pac-12 one-loss champ, avenge their loss to Washington. Texas, a 1-loss Big 12 champ, probably the second best win in college football this year, a road win in Tuscaloosa by double digits. Florida State, undefeated ACC Power 5 conference champ, solid, really good team, missing their starting quarterback, who's one of their better players. Alabama, 12-1 SEC champ, best win in college football by far this year and probably in the last 2 years if they beat Georgia. And then Georgia, sitting at 12-1. I think they're still in the conversation at that point. But those 5 teams, Oregon, Texas, Florida State, Alabama, and Georgia, 3 spots left after Michigan's guaranteed to be in. 5 teams fighting for those 3 spots. And I'm not sold on them for sure putting Alabama in the end at this point. Some are. I'm not 100% sure. I would. I just don't know if the committee's there. I know Greg Sankey's fighting tooth and nail for it. So is Nick Saban already. But again, Alabama's got to worry about beating Georgia first. But in this scenario, they have beaten Georgia and the rest of the favorites win. Alabama, like I just mentioned, they would have the best win in college football this season. Also, according to Cole Kubik last night, he tweeted this: overall opponent records for these teams in this conversation, these 8 teams. Alabama's opponent records, 85-59. Ohio State's 82-62. Texas 81-63. Georgia 75-68. Washington 75-69. Michigan 73-71. Oregon 72-72. Florida State fans tell me they got a harder schedule than Alabama, but here we go. Florida State 67-76 is their opponent's combined record. Not very good. I don't know. I was never that great at math. You can ask my mom. But those numbers don't really add up. Alabama's got the best overall opponent record at 85-59. Florida State sitting at 67-76. And Oregon right above them at 500 record, opponent's record, 72-72. Come on. Plus, add the eye test. Remember, you got to throw that into the recipe. In this scenario, if Alabama were to win the SEC and the rest of the favorites win, I'd go Michigan 1. Hear me out here. Texas 2, Alabama 3, and here's the one that puts all the ACC guys over the edge. Georgia at 4. In my opinion, those are the 4 best teams in that situation. Those are the 4 best teams. You're really going to punish Georgia for being a 12-1 non-conference champ with their only loss being to the 3rd-ranked team at a neutral site? Come on. If we're talking about the 4 truly best teams, when you incorporate the body of work with the eye test, you mix that up, there's no way it doesn't come out all hot, warm, nice. Ooh, you're about to eat it up, that red velvet cake, and you don't see Georgia and Alabama in it. If Alabama beats Georgia, there's no way. There's no way. Unless you just want to see a different crew of people. Florida State hadn't been in the playoff. Washington hadn't been in it since 2016. If you're wanting to go all that, let's see some new teams. Fine. Most deserving. Best, you'd have to say at that point, Michigan, Texas, Alabama, and Georgia. And like I said, if Alabama goes, and I said, hold up, Texas has to go. I think Texas goes as Alabama goes. Like if Alabama's in, Texas has to be in. So that's why I put them at 2. For the Florida State people, I just can't get over the Jordan Travis injury for Florida State. I think injuries have to be taken into account. I'm not trying to punish the rest of the teams, and that's maybe not right, but we're not here to get it. We're not here to be like morally right. We're here to get the 4 best teams into this college football playoff. And this is as tough of a season it can be. Some of these situations happen. Moving on, people wondering why I'd be wanting to put Georgia in. Georgia's resume is better than Oregon's. It just is. Still, even if they lost to Alabama, it's better than Oregon. Oregon would just have 2 top CFP top 25 wins over Oregon State and Washington. Georgia would have 3 against Tennessee, Missouri, and Ole Miss. In this scenario, though, I told you what I'd do. It'd be Michigan 1, Texas 2, Alabama 3, Georgia 4. I don't know what the committee would do. I really don't have a clue. I really don't. They could go numerous ways. They could leave Alabama out still. They could go Michigan. They could go Michigan. God, in that situation, who knows? They would go Michigan, Oregon, Florida State. I don't know. I think they want to put Florida State in. I can't really predict what the committee would do. In that situation, I think that's what they would do. I really do. I think you'd have Michigan 1, Texas probably 2. Oregon probably 2. I just don't know how you don't leave Alabama in. I don't know how you wouldn't put Alabama in. I'd put Georgia in, but people are killing me for that. I don't know what the committee would do in that situation if Alabama wins and the rest of the favorites. You could make a lot of different cases to me. Third scenario, Michigan and Georgia win, and Florida State, Texas, and Oregon lose. So let me say it again. Third scenario here, Georgia and Michigan both win. They're in. 2 spots are taken care of. But Florida State loses to Louisville in the ACC championship. Texas loses to Oklahoma State in the Big 12 title game, and Oregon loses to Washington. The biggest fan of this scenario would be the Ohio State Buckeyes. Remember, I didn't talk about them in a bit, but I mentioned them in the 8 that are contending for those 4 spots. Ohio State's, they're partying in Columbus. That Michigan win looks great now. Florida State lost. Texas lost. Oregon lost. Oh, the DFO, the director of football ops at Ohio State, is getting that flight manifest. It's most likely New Orleans at that point ready, because Georgia would be playing closer to their home. Georgia would pick the Sugar Bowl. And remember, the 2 semifinal games are the Sugar Bowl and the Rose Bowl. So factor that in when you're thinking about late Saturday night after we start getting this figured out. Sunday, we're the 1 seed, whether it's Georgia or Michigan. We get to pick where they want to play, closer to proximity. I think in this scenario, like I mentioned, with Georgia and Michigan winning, 2 spots taken care of, Florida State, Texas, and Oregon all losing in the conference championship games, I think you'd have to go Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Washington 3, and Ohio State 4. Ohio State's in. Washington's an undefeated Power 5, Pac-12 Power 5 conference champ. I think they're in at that point. I'm still not, and I've listened to some other shows too, I'm not 100% sold Washington if they just go undefeated and Alabama wins. Washington wants Alabama out. Again, I'm telling you, that Georgia win for Alabama, if it were to happen, is going to be weighted differently. It is. People are like, well, you're not supposed to compare the last few years into this one. We're human. We have 13 humans on this committee. Some don't belong on it. We almost have too many people that are administrative people that haven't worked in football full time or don't work in football full time. So that's a conversation for another day. But they're human beings. They're going to weight that heavily because you got a 29-game win streak on the line. Alabama would end. Coming off, you just beat a team who's won back-to-back national championships. Right, wrong, or indifferent, they're humans. They're going to factor that in. So it's going to be weighted heavily. I'm telling you, if you're a Washington Husky fan, you want to be cheering against Alabama. Just saying. Hard time seeing the SEC getting left out as we get closer. Just saying. But I think the committee would agree with me on that. I think in that scenario, Georgia and Michigan winning, Florida State, Texas, and Oregon losing. I think it'd be pretty easy. I think it'd be Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Washington 3, Ohio State 4. I think the committee would do that. 4th scenario, all the undefeated teams win and Texas win. Worst case scenario for the Texas Longhorns here. Worst case if you're Steve Sarkisian and his staff. Texas really needed BYU to beat Oklahoma State this last week in overtime so they could try to get that chance to avenge their loss to Oklahoma. That's the advantage Oregon has. They can avenge their 1 loss to Washington at Husky Stadium. Now they get to go do it in Las Vegas tomorrow night. Texas, I think they would have got more credit if they beat Oklahoma and they avenged that loss. Now they get Oklahoma State, who they hadn't played yet this year. But in this scenario, myself, I would go, if all the undefeated teams win and Texas win, I'm going Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Washington 3, Texas 4. That would be mine. Again, you can tell I'm pretty high on Texas. I think Texas is pretty good when they're healthy. I like both lines of scrimmage. I like their defensive line and their offensive. They're only giving like 81 yards rushing a game on defense. They're good, man. They're good. They get Quinn Ewers working here. Texas, I'm telling you, can do some damage. But in this scenario, I'm going Georgia, Michigan, Washington, and Texas. That's what I do. Again, you can tell I'm not high on Florida State because the quarterback situation bothers me. I just think if you put Georgia, whoever the number 1 seed, Michigan against Florida State in that 1 versus 4, it's going to be a blowout. We know that. For some reason, we just want to they deserve it. Let's put them in. Let's give everybody a trophy. That's what a lot of society is now. That's nothing against Florida State and Mike Norvell. They've had an incredible season. I was on the hot seat going into last year, kind of on the hot seat this year. They've overachieved. They've done really well. And I would probably put Florida State in, if I'm being candid and honest with you, if they had Jordan Travis. But I'm not pretending like I didn't have Florida State in before Jordan Travis. At least respect that I'm telling you why I changed my opinion. I think playing with your backup quarterback would be an issue. And for everybody tweeting at me, well, what if Jalen Milroe gets hurt and Alabama wins this week, or Carson Beck gets hurt for Georgia this week? Those are conversations to be had. I'm not disagreeing with that. But Jordan Travis is clearly out for the season. So that's why. But in this 4th scenario here, all undefeated teams win and Texas win. Again, Georgia, Michigan, Washington, and Texas. I think that's what I would do. I think the committee, they've shown the path of least resistance is what they want to go to. There's really been no changes here in the past 4 or 5 weeks. It's kind of embarrassing, but I think the committee would go in that scenario. Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Florida State. I think they're wanting to put Florida State in. I think that would probably be it. I think they put Florida State in over Texas in that scenario. I wouldn't, but I think they would. In the 5th and final scenario, Michigan, Alabama, Oregon, Louisville, and Oklahoma State all win. Total chaos. So Michigan and Oregon would be the only favorites winning in this scenario. But I have Michigan, Alabama, Oregon, Louisville, and Oklahoma State all winning. In this scenario, Texas is out, lost to Oklahoma State. They have 2 losses, non-conference champ. They're done. Texas is done. In that situation, Georgia is right back in it. They're right back in it. They're 12-1. They're 1 loss to the number 3 team, number 2 team, potentially depending where they're ranked in the country, neutral site. This is where I would go in this scenario. Michigan 1, Alabama 2, Oregon 3, Georgia 4. Can you imagine that semifinal? Michigan and Georgia in the Rose Bowl, Alabama, Oregon in the Sugar Bowl. Those are kind of my 5 realistic scenarios. Again, I didn't mention if Michigan were to lose to Iowa, but also I don't expect to see a unicorn in my front yard when I'm letting my dog out tomorrow. So I didn't incorporate that. I'm sorry. No offense to the Hawkeye fans out there. I think Michigan's just going to win that game. They're favored by 22 for a reason. They're going to win that game in Indy. Fully expect that. But those are my 1 through 5 scenarios I think that are realistic. Again, you'll kind of figure out with my predictions here what I think happens. But I think in the real scenario, people get real fired up about, which would be the 2nd scenario, the favorites win and Alabama pulls the upset in the SEC championship game. Me personally, like I said, I would go Oregon. I would go Michigan in. And then I would go Bama 2, Texas 3, Georgia 4. If I'm just being completely honest with you. And I'd go Texas 2. Let's go Michigan 1, Texas 2, Alabama 3, Georgia 4. Either way, you're going to get Texas, Alabama, whether they're 2 or 3, Michigan, Georgia. We'd get the rematch of Texas, Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. But again, I think those are the 4 best teams. You can't tell me. Remember, recipe, you got to look at the body work for sure. You have to. I mean, you look at the top 25 wins in the CFP. I mean, Alabama and Georgia have 3 of them. Florida State and Oregon don't have many. Oregon can only get 2. Florida State can only get up to 3. Well, Alabama and Georgia get up with 4, with one of them beating one another this week, which is going to happen. You got to factor in the eye test too, man. Come on. I mean, ladies, it's common sense here. I know it's always been the most deserving. Then we're wrong in the first place. If we want the 4 best teams, like Kirk Herbstreit said, those would be the 4 best teams in that situation. I think that will be the situation that'll be the biggest gripe. I mean, you'll have people burning down buildings in Tallahassee and Eugene in that situation as well. They're going to be pissed off too. It is what it is. I just wanted to break down the college football playoff scenarios. Tough job for the committee. I think they could have some better guys on there, people that actually understand football. It's conversation for another day, but this will be their most difficult. They're really just hoping the favorites win. Favorites win, Texas lose, everything's great. No one's cheering for Oklahoma State more than the Big 12 and the College Football Playoff Committee. It's Texas against the world, guys. It's Texas and Alabama kind of pair and pair, because I think Texas goes as Alabama goes. As long as they win, them against the world. You don't think the SEC, Chris Lowe mentioned it on the show there. You don't think the SEC is kind of, unless it's a really close game and really well-played game, we could get two teams in. I hope Georgia wins. So the SEC's thing. But I just wanted to go over the playoff scenarios, those 5 playoff scenarios that I think are the most realistic. I wanted to get into that. But change some things up here. We're going to go a little money-making weekend first. Lead it off. We got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bets. I put a bet on all the 8 conference championships, the Power 5 and the 3 Group of 5, Sun Belt, Conference USA, and AAC. Let's get to it, though. Alabama versus Georgia. Give me the over 54.5. I think we're going to be in the 60, 61 range. I'm going to give you my preview. We're going to be the SEC Championship preview right after this. But give me the over 54.5 in the Alabama-Georgia game. I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair. I like both offenses here. Georgia, probably the most efficient offense in the country. Alabama can't go make Carson Beck a little uncomfortable. Just talking to you, Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell. Georgia's going to get their points. Alabama's goal should be to hold them under 30, but I also think Alabama's going to score a little bit too. I like the over here. Oregon, minus 9.5 versus Washington. Give me the Ducks to cover double digits tomorrow night in Vegas for the Pac-12 title game. I like Oregon to come out with a chip on their shoulder. Kind of look really good in this game, if I'm going to be completely honest. Give me minus 9.5. Texas minus 15.5. I was really close to taking Oklahoma State with the points here, plus 15.5. Texas is going to win this game, but I took Texas in the point. I think they're going to try to make a statement if they get the opportunity. It's their sayonara to the old Big 12. They have a chance to go embarrass a Big 12 team on their way out. They will. I like Texas minus 15.5. Michigan didn't really have a feel for this. They're favored by 22. I mean, I ain't taking Iowa against Michigan no matter what. Give me Michigan minus 22. Louisville taking the points in the Power 5 game. Give me plus 2.5 in Charlotte against Florida State. Again, not a real feel. Wouldn't surprise me if Florida State won this game by double digits. Just not a fan of the whole backup quarterback situation. That's just a me thing. Not a fan. Louisville coming off a loss to Kentucky. I know. I'm just taking the points. What I think will be another close game. Group of 5 action. Give me Troy at home minus 6 versus App State in the Sun Belt Conference Championship game. Like John Summerall and the boys there. Apparently John Summerall potentially to Duke. Taking over for Mike Elko maybe. Is that a distraction? I don't know. But I'm taking them minus 6 at home. SMU, give me plus 3.5 at Tulane in the AAC in the American title game. Like what Rhett Lashley and them are doing, Preston Stone. Give me the Ponies, baby. Give me the Ponies plus 3.5. Then Liberty, minus 11 versus New Mexico State. I like Jamie Chadwell and the boys. Give me Liberty. Give me the Flames minus 11. So those are my 8 bets across college football. I'll get that graphic posted for you if you want to go back and use it as an example. Go follow up. I encourage you to. We're at 48% for the season. Not great, but we're honest on this show. I'm going to come back and tell you where I'm not good when I'm wrong, and I'm going to tell you when I'm right at times. We'll wrap that up at the end of the year, but those are the 8 bets. Took all the lines except the Alabama-Georgia over 54.5, and that's probably the one I'm most confident in. Probably that Alabama-Georgia over 54.5. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored. A lot of points scored. After that, if you were going to ask me, probably Oregon minus 9.5. We're going to probably minus 9.5. After that, I think it's total crapshoot. Like I said, back and forth with Texas minus 15.5 for Oklahoma State. Wouldn't shock me if that game's closer than people think, but I think Texas ultimately will win that game. They'll win that game. Michigan, that game, Iowa may be a 2-hour game, whereas that Oregon-Washington game tomorrow may be 6 hours. So you get 2 opposite ends of the spectrum there. But money-making weekend, those are my 8 bets. Favorite one, my Great White Buffalo guarantee is the Alabama-Georgia over 54.5. SEC Championship preview time now, guys. Georgia, Alabama, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone on CBS. The last CBS game with an SEC. I'm sure they'll have some fantastic montage going into this one. But Georgia, favored by 5.5 right now, setting the tone for you. This is one we've kind of been eyeing since mid-October. I talked about it at the beginning of the show. Really since LSU lost to Ole Miss and struggled against Missouri next week, which that didn't look bad. Missouri 10-2 team, but kind of felt like Alabama keeps improving. They may find themselves in Atlanta. And they did. And again, I've talked about it before. This is one of Nick Saban's best coaching jobs. Here's some crazy, stupid numbers for you heading into this game. Georgia riding a 29-game win streak. Last loss in this building, Mercedes-Benz Stadium against Alabama and Bryce Young in the 2021 SEC championship game. There's a stat for you. Nick Saban, 10-1 in SEC championship games. Career, that's unbelievable. His only loss coming in 2008 to Florida and Tim Tebow. I was there with my dad there. Fantastic game, came down to the fourth quarter. But 10-1 in the SEC championship game, that's stupid. That's stupid numbers. A lot on the line with this one. We got championships, potential playoff appearances, a true passing of the torch, in my opinion. Georgia, obviously, the last 2 years have been the better program, but this feels like if Georgia can go beat Alabama back-to-back times, again, they didn't play last year. That's something I feel like you see some Alabama fans kind of hanging on to. Like, yeah, you won the national championship last year, Georgia, but you didn't have to see us. Georgia was the better team. Just Alabama didn't live up to their end of the bargain of getting to Atlanta and seeing Georgia in the SEC championship because LSU won the West last year. But it kind of feels like this is Georgia's the king of college football right now. And I think they are on top of college football. But I think you put any of that to rest if they win on Saturday. I think that's what it is. If Georgia wins this game, it's a true passing of the torch. From a playoff perspective, if Georgia wins, they're in. If Bama wins, some assume they're in, but some also say they may need some help. I think they should easily be in. But some say they need some help. Georgia has definitely been the more consistent team throughout the season. And honestly, Georgia's probably the better team. I think they probably win this game 6 out of 7 times if they played it 10 times. But we're not. We're only playing it one time at 3 o'clock Central Standard Time Zone in Atlanta. We only have one shot for this. But Alabama's got to have been it had to have been one of the more resilient teams in college football this year. Just a quarterback situation going throughout, just a young team. People bashing them after week 2, myself included, week 3 after South Florida. People just, they're going to end up slipping up. They're going to end up slipping up. They've only won 10 straight now. Very resilient team. How does Alabama, though, with all this resiliency, this is Georgia, though. You haven't seen this animal this year. And I don't think Georgia's seen Alabama yet this year either. How does Alabama play its best game of the year? Because that is what it's going to take to win this game. And I think people sometimes get a little overwhelmed with that statement. Like, they got to play their best game of the year. It's like, we don't have to play perfect. No, nobody's going to play perfect. But I think Alabama can't shoot themselves in the foot in critical situations, get a holding, a procedural penalty, false start, stuff like that, face mask, offsides. When Georgia maybe it's 4th and 1, they're trying to get you to jump off sides, or they're going to call time, you jump off sides. You can't do that. Stuff like that. Let's play mistake-free football. But where this game will be won, 3 keys to victory for both teams here. I'm giving you. It's championship, so we're changing it up. Jalen Milroe has to make plays with his legs in this game. Has to. Non-negotiable. Sometimes you feel like he's hesitant. Like, I don't really want to take off. Like at Auburn last week, he takes off, then he goes back behind the line of scrimmage twice. It's a legal forward pass. What are we doing? That stuff can't happen. You'll be a decisive runner this week if you're Jalen Milroe. Offensive tackles, we're going to have to protect the edges against Jalen Walker and Damon Wilson. That's going to have to happen. Those 2 guys are twitchy pass rushers. Caden Proctor's improved, but you hadn't seen one of these guys in a while. Auburn didn't really rush the pass rusher that well. They hadn't all year, but this is different. Jalen Walker and Damon Wilson are going to have a chance. Then Alabama's going to have to convert red zone trips into touchdowns. They've been solid red zone scoring, but converting them to touchdowns, they've struggled at times. That can't happen. Can't be settling for a bunch of field goals because this may be Kirby Smart's best offense he's had. It's crazy saying that with how they were operating at such a high level to end the year last year under Todd Monken. And then finally, either Trey Amos, Malachi Moore, or Caleb Downs in that secondary is going to have to play the best game of the season, best of their ability. They really are. And you have to combine that with make Carson Beck uncomfortable. I know that's like 4 or 5 keys to the game, but I kind of combined the safeties between Trey Amos, Malachi Moore, and Caleb Downs having to play their best game and play to their highest ability. They are, because Georgia's going to get in those nub sets. We got a tight end with no one to his right. He's kind of just sitting there naked. And that's going to be number 19, Brock Bowers, as we all know. If they decide, and there's going to be a lot of one-on-one situations because that's just how Alabama defends it. They're going to go put their star on him, and that's either going to be probably Trey Amos or Malachi Moore. Maybe they move Caleb Downs. Those guys are going to have to win some one-on-one battles against Brock Bowers. Not every one of them. Not every one of them. Hear me right. They have to win their fair share, though. And if they can't, Alabama's going to double Brock Bowers. That's going to lead probably Caleb Downs on the other side with the slot guys like Arian Smith, maybe Dylan Bell, Lad McConkey. You put in a true freshman in that situation. Georgia has weapons, but between one of those 3 guys are going to play the game of the season for themselves. They are. They just are. Trey Amos, Malachi Moore, Caleb Downs are going to have to play really well. And it's probably going to be a combination. Like I said, you're going to have to win one-on-one battles, especially Colin and Malachi Moore, Trey Amos, against Brock Bowers, when they get in that nub formation where they're trying to set you and isolate one-on-one situations with Brock Bowers, and the best player in college football, probably the best tight end of all time, to be a tough cover. And if you can't, you got to bring someone over to help. You take him away. But there's Ladd McConkey, Arian Smith, Dylan Bell. It's tough for a true freshman. Caleb Downs, great player. Best overall, probably secondary player they've had in a long time since Minkah Fitzpatrick at such a young age. But it's tough to put a true freshman in that situation. Alabama has to win those, though. And like I said, you got to make Carson Beck uncomfortable. He hadn't been touched a lot this year. But if there was a game for guys like Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell to show up, it has to be this weekend. The defense, I think, is going to be key to this game for Alabama. People are like, well, the offense has to score. How he's going to have to score. If Alabama can't keep Georgia under 30, I don't think they're going to win this game. Defense has been great all year. It's been good. Not one of Alabama's probably all-time better defenses, but the game's changed. Great offenses beat great defenses now. It just is what it is. Teams get their points. Alabama's get to play their best defensive performance they've seen all year. Now, I think Auburn last week showed some stuff in the run game that I don't think Georgia's going to do. So people are going to well, Auburn ran all over them. Georgia doesn't run those same run schemes. Now, Georgia does have their fair share of weapons. And another thing about how healthy is Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers? There's going to be some matchups. Need to see it, Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell. Need to be making Carson Beck uncomfortable. For Georgia, keys to win this game, I got 4. They got to be able to get Jalen Milroe on the ground. I think he's going to be a more decisive runner in this football game. So when he takes off and you have one-on-one situations, and Georgia's probably the best tackling team in the country. Them and Alabama are probably the top 2 tackling teams in the country. Throw Michigan in there. Georgia cannot miss their opportunities to go bring Jalen Milroe to the ground. But I think some teams underestimate his ability to just eat up angles. He's deceptively fast, and he's a thick, big kid, similar to Cam Newton. Not as big, but he's thicker than you think. Next, they got to make Milroe beat you through tight windows. Kind of mush rush. Think how Alabama defended with Kirby Smart, Tim Tebow, and Cam Newton. Granted, they lost to Tim Tebow in 2008 and Cam Newton in 2010. I mean, they got the revenge against Tim Tebow in 2009, but still, they're going to want to keep him in the pocket. He doesn't move his landmarks much. I mean, as you can watch Alabama games, Jalen Milroe doesn't take 3-step drops, 5-step drops. They don't really move the pocket. He kind of is where he is. So Georgia's going to know where he's at most nights, just like Alabama's going to know where Carson Beck is most nights. He doesn't really move his landmark either. He kind of stays where he stays in the pocket. They don't really move it a whole lot. Maybe here and now, from going back and watching games every now and then. But for the most part, both these teams are going to know where these quarterbacks are sitting. But Georgia's got to make Milroe beat them through the pocket, through tight windows. Alabama's receivers are fine, but they're not Jamison Williams or like the Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, Devontae Smith. They don't have that this year. If you're going to compare anybody, it's probably Jermaine Burton, but he's not that. And those guys have given, guys like Marvin Harrison and Jamison Williams have given Georgia hell throughout these years. And then finally for Georgia, or two more things, sorry. You got to protect Carson Beck. When he's comfortable, he's playing at a higher NFL caliber level than anybody I think in the country. Now, Georgia's going to be fighting their ass off from an NIL perspective to get him back this year or for next year. He's had a fantastic year. But I'll be interested to see what he is when Alabama may be getting back there as a quarterback. Alabama's had success. This is a decent matchup for Alabama's defense. Georgia has more weapons on the outside than I think they've had in the past, especially with if you get Bowers and McConkey, you get back a little bit more healthy. Here, McConkey's not practicing that much this week, though. But it's a decent matchup. Alabama usually struggles with a guy who can go make plays with their legs. I mean, like we were talking about, Jaden Daniels. That's why he scared you so much. Not just really his arm, but his legs. Carson Beck, athletic enough to go pick up that 8-9 first down marker if he has to on third down. But he's not like an explosive runner, 50, 60-yard runner consistently. So I think it's a good matchup for Alabama. But if you're Georgia, you have to protect Carson Beck. This can't be the game where things start slipping through the cracks and we're not protecting our quarterback and Alabama's got 4 or 5 sacks. And then finally, if you're Georgia, you can't have the one disastrous quarter like you've traditionally had against Alabama. Going back to 2008, the blackout beat down. 2012, horrific into the fourth quarter. Alabama controlled the back half of the third quarter and the fourth quarter. Game ended up running out on Chris Conley. 15, Alabama just kind of dominated Georgia in that game. And the rain game in Athens, I was at Georgia staff that time. 17, they just collapsed in the fourth quarter, let Alabama back in it, 2nd and 26 national championship. 18, the SEC championship, Alabama dominated the fourth quarter with Jalen Hurts coming in. 20, Alabama dominated the third quarter to pull away. 21, Alabama dominated the second quarter to pull away. Second and third quarter to dominate, pull away, win the SEC championship. And Georgia ended up dominating the fourth quarter to win the national championship in 21. Georgia can't have these meltdowns of quarters that let Alabama go on a 17-0 run in a quarter or something. That can't happen. So those are the 4 keys to Georgia. But it's prediction time, guys. It is prediction time. I think this is a total coin flip of a game. Like I mentioned, I think Georgia's the better overall team. If this game was played 10 times, I think they win 6 out of 7. But we're not playing a series. We don't know at the time if this will be a quarterfinal game, but it feels like it. Georgia wins, they're in. They're in the playoff. Alabama, I think they'll be in. Committee, I don't know. They should be in. They could need some help. This feels like a real quarterfinal type setting. I think it's in Alabama's best interest to hold Georgia under 30 in this one. That should be the goal. The Bama defense is going to have to play its best game of the year. Like I said, you got to hold them under 30. Affecting Carson Beck will be key. Bama feels confident, like they always do. Their secondary will be able to hold up against Georgia. Will they? I don't know, but they have the confidence after talking to people. They know they can. Pass rush, you're going to have to go affect Carson Beck because he's playing at a very high level right now. Very efficient level. Maybe one of the more efficient levels in the country, besides probably Jaden Daniels. I just don't see Alabama winning this game if it goes back and forth and it's a high-scoring affair. I just don't. For Georgia, it's trying to avoid, like I mentioned, that disastrous fourth quarter that has haunted you against Alabama in these kind of games in the past, and it's getting Jalen Milroe to the ground. That is the key for Georgia. Again, Georgia's been the more consistent team throughout the entire season. They have. Now, I will say this. I think Alabama, call me crazy, their best game is probably better than Georgia's overall best game, just because I think that's how dynamic Jalen Milroe is at playing his position. Just a different animal Georgia hadn't seen that brings that running dynamic that Carson Beck does. If Alabama's playing their best and Jalen Milroe's playing his best. But that's what it's going to take for Alabama to win this game. Both teams have plenty of paths to victory in this one. But in this type of game, I have to go with the team that has been more consistent throughout the year and the team that I trust more. And that is Georgia. I think Alabama comes out, plays well right off the bat. I think Alabama's up at half. But when when has Alabama played a complete game this year? They haven't. They played some good quarters, some good halves, but not that complete game. Maybe it happens this week. But I'm only going off the information I have in my hand. Georgia's been the more consistent team. I expect Georgia to adjust like they have all season at half, control the third quarter, add in, I think Alabama struggles to cash in touchdowns in the red zone in the second half. And Georgia gets the offense going in the second half to get over that important 30-point win total where I talked about. If Georgia gets over 30, I have a hard time seeing Alabama win. Give me Georgia 34-27. Again, I think this is a coin flip. Could draw it up a lot of different ways. Plenty of paths to victory to both these teams. I trust Georgia more. The offense isn't going to hurt itself as much. I just trust Georgia a little bit more not to hurt themselves because Alabama's still a young team. They're still a young team, but I'm going to go with the consistency and trust and give me Georgia. Georgia 34-27 in a really good SEC championship game. Whew. Preview SEC championship, that's crazy. We've been waiting on this one for a while. Finally here. It's crazy even to preview that one. But you know what else is almost here? December 4th, Monday. That will be when the transfer portal opens. Let's talk about some additions to it right now. Before we get into that, though, a starting quarterback in this league announced he was coming back. Graham Mertz, Florida's quarterback, had the broken clavicle. He has announced he is coming back next year for Florida. Remember, he came over from Wisconsin, but he will be coming back to play for the Gators next year. Max Johnson entered the portal the other day. He's already committed to North Carolina, the quarterback from Texas A&M. Solid pickup for North Carolina. What's the outlook for them losing Drake May? It's just an interesting take. Will Rogers, quarterback at Mississippi State. They've hired Jeff Levy, but he is already in the portal. He's gone. Jalen Geiger, safety at Kentucky, he's in. Offensive lineman from Vanderbilt, Kevo Wesley, he's in. Sticking with Vanderbilt quarterback Ken Seals, we saw him a little bit throughout the season. He's in the portal. Hunter Talley from Arkansas, he's a tight end. He's in the portal. Isaiah Cummins, tight end from Kentucky, he's in the portal. Chris Rhodes, wide receiver from Arkansas, he's in the portal. Rylan Goody, tight end from Mississippi State, transferred from Georgia previously, he's in the portal. Remington Strickland from Texas A&M, he's an offensive lineman, he's in the portal. Stephen Lasoya, offensive lineman from Mississippi State, he's in the portal. Warren Burrell played some, it was a North Gwinnett kid, played some corner at Tennessee here. Tennessee fans are well familiar with him. He's in the portal. So there's a couple of names from the SEC that have already entered the portal, can't officially go in until December 4th, which would be Sunday at midnight, Monday morning. Some names to keep an eye on, though. KJ Jefferson was rumored to be entering the portal, but he put on Instagram that he was not. He was not officially entering it. So keep an eye on that. Not official. Grayson McCall, Coastal Carolina's quarterback. He is in the portal. Was rumored to go to Auburn last year. Didn't have enough credits. Had to go back to Coastal. Maybe Auburn again. Will Howard, starting quarterback for Kansas State. He's in the portal. Here's an interesting one. Riley Leonard, the Duke quarterback who's kind of been in and out of injuries this past year. He's in the portal, rumored to be going to Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman, though, and already. Dante Moore, quarterback from Michigan, currently was at UCLA, went to high school in Michigan. He entered the portal. Today, DJ Uiagalelei, transferred from Clemson to Oregon State now. He's in the portal. And then rumor is wide receiver Juice Wells from South Carolina may go test the transfer portal market. Not test. He probably knows where he's going if he's going into the transfer portal market. Just like Riley Leonard put on when he entered his compliance paperwork to enter the portal at Duke. He put no contact. Rumors already coming out. He's going to Notre Dame. Thought Auburn may be a decent fit there. He's a Saraland kid, north of Mobile. So I thought that would maybe be the fit. Auburn would love to have him this year. Auburn won 2 or 3 more games with him this year. But it sounds like South Carolina's having a hard time kind of keeping their roster. Again, I talked a couple of weeks ago. They're going to have to get better in the NIL, and player retention is more key than your casual fan thinks these days. Of course, we got to keep our good players. But administration has to support it. You got to support the guys that are proven. Where it gets all said is when you bring these guys in, you're already paying them and haven't proven anything. It's not good for the locker room. Need to keep player retention is key. That's just going over the portal. I'll keep you updated as we keep going through our next few episodes here. Next Monday, I'll probably have an even longer list because that's when the portal starts that day, December 4th. Moving to basketball, though. SEC, ACC challenge this past Tuesday and Wednesday night. 7-7 overall in the 14 matchups. The SEC went 4-3 on Tuesday, 3-4 on Wednesday. Let's start with Tuesday. Let me share my screen with you. Tuesday's matchups here. So, SEC gets off with a nice win. South Carolina, first of all, South Carolina and Ole Miss are the 2 remaining undefeated teams in basketball in the SEC right now. Never would have thought. But South Carolina gets a 65-53 win. Notre Dame's not very good. This isn't your Mike Bray Notre Dame team. South Carolina, I mean, Mookie Johnson, the Cooper kid playing really well. The BJ Mack kid playing really well. South Carolina, again, like I told you, they're not as bad as people think. I didn't pick them to finish last in the league. I didn't think they'd be that bad. They're improved. They're looking pretty solid. That's a good win. One of the bigger shockers, Georgia Tech getting the 67-59 win over Mississippi State. Mississippi State just a no-show. You can tell they missed Tolu Smith a little bit. Offense still isn't completely there yet. They defended well enough. Only gave up 67 points, but again, they're going to struggle to score a little bit until they get the full lineup back. They just totally laid an egg in a real winnable opportunity here against Georgia Tech. But they're back in Atlanta, I think, next week to play – I forget who, but they'll be back making that return trip to Atlanta. But that's a tough one. That was one of the more shocking ACC, SEC results. I mean, this game really wasn't even that close from the get-go. Mississippi State dropping one, that's a tough one. I expect them to be a little bit better than that. Syracuse getting the 80-57 win, the 23-point win at home against LSU. I thought LSU could have won this. I picked Syracuse, but just LSU, not a good basketball team right now. Not shocking Syracuse got this win, but this was an opportunity LSU could have had. Kentucky, them in Arkansas. We'll get to Arkansas in a minute. The 2 most impressive teams in this challenge. Kentucky getting the 95-73 win over the number 8 team, Miami. Kentucky still has Aaron Bradshaw and Big Z out too. Kentucky has a very high ceiling, maybe number 1 in my power rankings coming out next week in basketball. And this could be Cal's best team since his potential 14-15 undefeated team. Call me crazy. It's got that big of upside. They signed the number 1 freshman class in the country. You add in Trey Mitchell and Antonio Reeves back. They get some of Aaron Bradshaw, Big Z off. I like Kentucky. This is a massive win. I thought they looked solid against Kansas. They've been in a loss a couple of weeks ago. It's a big win. Very impressive win. Dominated a good Miami team. Missouri getting a solid win on the road, not in an easy environment. At Pitt, I thought they'd lose. I mean, this was a Missouri team that lost to Jackson State, a winless Jackson State team. Dennis Gates and his boys. I mean, Nick Honor didn't even play that well. They didn't even play that well in 170, 164. I can't figure out this Missouri team. I'm going to keep watching. Can't figure them out, though, but a big win. Ole Miss getting a 20-point win at home. They're undefeated. Like I mentioned, 6-0, getting a 72-52 win over the Wolfpack of NC State. And then on the same night, Chris Beard announces Musa Cisse, the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year center from Oklahoma State. He's now eligible for Ole Miss. He'll play their next game Saturday against Memphis. Massive. 2 great days for Ole Miss. Ole Miss 6-0. Just improved through the last 3 weeks, too. They're not a great team. I'm not saying they're going to make the NCAA tournament, but they're improving, and you see it. And then another disappointing one. Clemson getting the 85-77 win over Alabama. Alabama may be the worst defensive team in the SEC. They just consistently just give up easy buckets. They can't guard the perimeter I think Clemson was 11 for 21 from beyond the arc, giving up second chance points. P.J. Hall scored 21 points in 21 minutes, the big man for Clemson, he didn't play that much. He was in foul trouble and scored whenever he wanted. Alabama went on a 8-0 run to go up 7, and then they subbed him back in and immediately just tied the game up. And then Clemson went on a 13-0 run and it was over. I still like Alabama. They're just solid. I don't know if they finished in the top 4 now. Still trying to figure out some things. They just got to get better defensively. But I just think the personnel is what it is this year. They're going to just have to go out and score some people. I think some nights you're going to be like, oh, man, Alabama, look at them, man. Maybe Final Four. And some nights you're going to be like, they could lose to the worst team in the league because they can't guard. I think it's going to be that kind of year for Alabama. But Alabama, they get Arkansas State next. They have a massive 3-game stretch coming up with Purdue and Toronto, at Arizona, and then at Creighton. The goal should be to maybe get one of those games. Try to get one. But again, SEC went 4-3 this day on Tuesday. Moving to last night's action. Florida dropping a contest at Wake. Wake getting the 82-71 win. Florida had their chances here. Florida and Alabama are so similar to me. I mean, Riley Kugel didn't play a whole lot. Wake's a solid team. I think Steve Forbes does a fantastic job. This was one Florida could have had, one of these mid-tier matchups that would have really helped the SEC, but they don't get it. A&M, Tyrese Boots Radford didn't play. I hope he's all right. Low-scoring affair. Virginia getting a 59-47 win. This is one I thought A&M could have get because this isn't your normal Virginia team. They've had way better teams. This is a game A&M could go get, but A&M, they're one of those weird teams. They play so much better at home. When they like to get to the free throw line where they can get some calls, play a little physical. This was in their wheelhouse, a low-scoring affair, but just couldn't get it done. SEC just getting whipped right here. North Carolina putting a 100 spot up on Tennessee. This was with Dalton Connect scoring 33 points. I think Tennessee, the defensive workhorse program that it is, giving up 100 points. Never thought I'd see the day under Rick Barnes. That's baffling. The offense has improved. They scored 92 points. This was a baffling. This one really wasn't even as close as the score indicates. SEC on a rough streak right out of the gate here on Wednesday night. Boston College getting the 80-62 win over Vanderbilt. I thought Vanderbilt could get that win. That was a tough loss. Georgia coming down they were down 17 with 6 minutes left to get a buzzer beater shot to beat Florida State 68-66 win. That made this game 500, or this challenge 500. That's a big win for the SEC. Georgia's improved with Mike White. Florida State's not very good with Leonard Hamilton, but a win's a win. Auburn getting the home win against Virginia Tech 74-57. Kind of expected that. Would have been shocked if Auburn lost that one. And then the big one, just like Kentucky, Arkansas bouncing back after losing, 3 of their last 4 against UNC Greensboro, and then 2 out in the battle for Atlantis. Get the 80-75 home win against Duke. You see people on Twitter saying the greatest basketball environment I've ever been to. They hosted. Looked at Bud Walton Arena last night, was rocking with them playing Duke at home. Kind of felt like a must game, kind of like the Kansas game in the tournament last year. The just kind of felt one of those tournament games from us. Like it's like, all right, their backs against the wall. Muss said he's took over all the film review, spent 14 hours on a Saturday doing all the film scouting stuff himself. Seems that they had a chip on their shoulder. Muss is a master motivator. It's at home. If this was at Cameron Indoor, I feel like we're all feeling different. They're without their best player. Why wouldn't they win? Tremont Mark out with the tailbone back fracture. He's going to be fine. But again, they're without their best player, backs against the wall. You're at home. That was a dangerous spot for Duke, and Arkansas proved it. Massive win for Arkansas. It could be a season-defining one. But Arkansas getting the 80-75 win over the Duke Blue Devils at home. Just some quick thoughts around the league. This challenge after is disappointing a little bit overall. I thought the SEC would win this challenge, but no need to panic. I thought Alabama, Mississippi State, Florida, and Tennessee all disappointed to some extent, and Texas A&M as well. But I thought Arkansas and Kentucky and Ole Miss got massive wins. 2 solid: Arkansas, Duke, Kentucky, Miami. Ole Miss 6-0, getting a big 20-point win against NC State. Their best defender eligible. Great 2 days for Ole Miss, like I mentioned. You got to remember this: like a lot of newcomers with the portal, a lot of teams with injuries that don't have their full lineup, like Tennessee. Toby Awaka didn't play. Ole Miss, I mentioned Musa Cisse coming back. A lot of teams don't have their full lineup. Boots Radford for A&M. So let this get settled in and see where we're at heading into conference play. Again, never thought South Carolina and Ole Miss would be the last 2 remaining undefeated teams in the league right now. But they are. But long way to go. It's only November. This is where you start building your resume, where you're looking at late February, early March, being like, man, I wish I had another quality win. That's why I thought it was a tough loss for Alabama this past week. Clemson, who I think is pretty good, I think it's going to look like a solid win come March on your resume, and you had him at home and you let it slip through your fingers. This is the opportunity to start building that resume. But let's look at the rest of this week's schedule across the SEC before we get you out of here. So our next matchup, Friday night, tomorrow night. So you got Mercer at Georgia. Georgia should be able to handle this one. That should be a win. George Washington at South Carolina. South Carolina should continue the undefeated streak there. Southeastern at LSU. LSU can't afford another loss to a fellow Louisiana school like they lost to Nichols earlier, but LSU should handle that. I expect the SEC both to get those wins on Saturday or on Friday. You got 3 more matchups. The big one over the weekend, Memphis at Ole Miss. It's a big one. Sold out crowd at the Pavilion. Memphis, solid team. Got guys like SEC fans are familiar with. Javon Quinterly, transferred from Alabama, as the point guard at Memphis. They beat Arkansas in the battle for Atlanta, so they already have a win over an SEC team. They're heading into probably a pretty fired up Pavilion. They like their Ole Miss Rebels this year, and they've improved game to game. It's on ESPN2 at 1. UNC Wilmington at Kentucky. How does Kentucky bounce back after the big win against Miami? Alabama A&M at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt should get that win. And then on Sunday, 3 more. Auburn at App State. Expect Auburn to get that one. Wichita State, traditionally a pretty good team, at Missouri before Missouri goes and plays at Kansas next. And Missouri at home should get that one. I believe that was an overtime game last year, if I remember right. Yeah, I think it was. And then Southern University, SWAC school, coming and playing at Mississippi State. Mississippi State trying to get back on track after a real surprising loss to Georgia Tech in Atlanta last night. But that's the next 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday in the SEC. But guys, that's all I got for you on this episode. We covered a lot. We covered all the most likely 5 real scenarios the College Football Playoff Committee is going to have to decide. I went through my SEC championship prediction. I have Georgia. I'm going to go with a more consistent team I trust, who I think is going to play a full 60 minutes. Close one, great championship game. Just, it's crazy to think about the last CBS SEC game. Of course, it's going to be Alabama and Georgia. Alabama would have to be in it, right? We talked some transfer portal additions, some guys who could maybe go in, keep an eye on KJ Jefferson. It's going to be a big wide receiver market in the portal this year. A lot to be a real high. I don't know, always demand for playmakers, especially in the offensive day and age we are. Remember, great offenses beat great defenses right now. It's crazy to say now, but it's true. Big-time playmakers change the game. The Keon Colemans of the world. So think about it. It'll be a lot of big-time wide receivers. Remember, Juice Wells. Be on the lookout for Juice Wells from South Carolina dipping his toes in the portal. And then we talked about the ACC, SEC challenges past week in basketball on Tuesday and Wednesday. 14 matchups, split 7-7. Reviewed Friday, Saturday, or previewed Friday, Saturday, and Sunday's matchups in the SEC as well. Fantastic time of year, guys. Championship weekend. A lot of decisions in the committee. Do teams like Alabama make it hard for the committee to make decisions? Do we have all the favorites win? Plus, the craziest one, I'm telling you, is going to be if all the favorites win and Alabama wins. It's going to be crazy. A lot of different opinions. But remember, as we get off this episode, it's about the body of work mixed in with the eye test. People go, well, that's subjective. It's a committee we're voting. It's going to be subjective. We're all human beings. It's got to marry. We can't just go, well, they're undefeated, they're in. Well, yeah, I'm not comparing an undefeated to a 4-loss team. If there's a 1-game difference, I think you can compare and contrast because, like I've said, all over social media all week, all schedules are not created equally. So keep that when you're watching, making these decisions who you think should be in the college football playoff. Let your eyes tell you some stuff, too. Trust your eyes. That's what I always used to tell my students when I worked in college football when they would evaluate. Trust your eyes. Just because I don't like him doesn't mean you shouldn't like him, and I may be wrong, you may be right. But again, we covered a ton on this episode. Fun episode. Love breaking down all this. Championship weekend, guys. Next time I see you, we will have the 4-team college football playoff. You have a fantastic weekend. And I appreciate you joining us on this episode of Mach 10 Sports.